Yo. Yo.
Welcome to the 188th Wing Podcast, where you get your in-depth information about what's happening in your wing. I'm Master Sergeant Chauncey Reed, and today I'm here with our ISR Group Commander, Colonel Michael Martin, Ops Group Commander Brian Anderson, and Communication Flight Commander Major Kimberly Hunter. We're going to talk about the future fight, agile, adaptable airmen, and technology, including artificial intelligence.
Colonel Michael Martin, ISR Group Commander. Happy to be here.
All right, Colonel Brian Anderson. I'm the Ops Group Commander.
And Major Kimberly Hunter, I am the Comm Flight Commander.
Thank you all for being here. If you don't mind, let's start with the next fight, the unknown. What do we prepare for?
Excellent question, Chauncey. Excuse me. So when I think of the next fight, not only for my group, just from a large perspective or larger perspective, it's we're shifting from fighting in CENTCOM to a all-domain fight with a near-peer adversary. So an adversary that has watched us fight in CENTCOM for the last 20-plus years, and how we project power. They've been watching, observing, and training to defeat how we as the U.S. project power.
I think to answer your next fight question, I think you got to understand the problem, right? What is the problem? But the future, what is that future fight for us? We have to continue building and build new effect-based units, right? So that could be remotely piloted aircraft, pockets of forward deployed ground forces, new cyber operations, new cyber-enabled operators, space operators, all together employing the capabilities in a permissive, contested, and denied environment. The next fight is going to be hard, right? Likely it's going to be challenging. It's going to be full of technology and decisions we've never had to make before. So we like to talk about you got to be trained, you got to be adaptable, you got to be resilient, all right? So trained, right? Trained to whatever the next fight is, right? That's why we like to say the next fight. It's going to change. Our airmen have to be able to adapt to what the battlefield's going to look like, and resiliency, right? So I like to talk about resiliency both at work and at home, right? Because your family resiliency is just as important, right? But to combat some of that stuff, because I don't think anyone in this room can really figure out what that looks like, right? You can look at the news every single day, and every single day you're amazed of what you're seeing on the news, right? But if you're trained to do your job, whatever your job is, right, we're in the right path. That's how we improve our daily operations, and then how we use our innovative talent for process improvement, right? So that way our folks can concentrate on what matters, the trained part, the adaptable part.
So in my mind, the next fight is going to be completely different than what we've ever had before. We're going to be challenged on a multi-domain level. Air superiority is going to be challenged. And our heavy reliance on cyber is going to be challenged. And I think in order to combat that, we've got to find efficiencies with our airmen and our technology. And we've kind of got to change our focus from trying to figure out, at least from the cyber perspective, how we secure against a cyber attack, and kind of pivot to where we are thinking about how do we operate in a contested environment, and how do we circumvent those times that they do get through and they do affect our networks.
I mean, that's what she said is absolutely it, right? We're spending all this time blocking, right, our adversaries from getting in our equipment and our technology, that we know we're not going to be able to keep them out of it. We're going to have to make sure how we maintain command and control, and our airmen know how to, work in that hard, denied environment that could be, here in the U.S. or overseas, right?
Yeah, and they're going to be separated. They could be separated. If comms go down, they're going to have to be able to make decisions on their own.
And that's where the agile, adaptable airman is key. How important is that multi-capable airman to our success?
I would venture to say it's the most important piece. So, excuse me, technology is just an enabler. It's a tool. Without the human capital, we'll struggle. They're being taught at school, and and then further educated once they get here and trained to critically think using like structured analytical techniques, to not just look at everything at face value. They're being trained on how to think and how to break down problems and not what to think. So having our airmen operating in the current battle spaces they are, live local, serve global, they're operating here at a employed in place mission, but they could jump from battle space to battle space, and not all terrain is going to look the same. So we're having our airmen test and exercise how to function in those environments, and using the similar technology or systems to walk through those battle spaces. So what we're trying to do is, we know they call them data lakes, we call them data oceans. There's so much information that's being collected out there. What our analysts are doing is they're sifting, sorting, filtering, and taking all the information and making sense of it. So that's what they're trying to provide our combatant commanders, the joint force, and our elected officials, is decision advantage through intelligence, through assessments, through reports on what the ground truth is, knowing that we have adversaries that are intentionally trying to clog up the information space with misinformation and disinformation.
It's a lot, right? So what's great about the Air National Guard, we have our part-time force, especially here in Arkansas, that in their civilian jobs, they're working on high-powered iCloud computing, software engineering, cybersecurity, other in-demand skills. Kind of as we move forward, if people want to Google Gig Eagle, it's a gigeagle.mil. It's essentially a AI-powered software that's helping our reservists go out there and figure out DoD needs a problem solved or a software developed, and they can use this app to find their resources, to get put on orders, which essentially takes their skill, what their information is, and the AI algorithm, right, will key on the similar words and help them line up with a particular talent that they have serving the DoD. And then the hiring manager from the DoD will essentially get a whole list of candidates and, solve the problem that they have based on the need of what software technology or, short-term staffing need.
So really all this technology is just making us more efficient. So Colonel Martin mentioned the ISR and the big data problem. In the past we've had to deal with, we can collect all the data we can, but we only have so many people to kind of go through it and sift through it and make products for the commanders and the decision makers. So what technology does, and automation and AI and machine learning, it kind of helps us to be more efficient, and hopefully in the future that's really what's going to sift through all that data and highlight, hey, this is important to the warfighter, or this is important, and kind of guide us to the decisions instead of us trying to sift through everything. Because, the goal is to do this more efficiently with less people.
And the time component is probably the biggest factor. As you hear about quantum computing and all these other things out there, it's going to be at the speed of not only relevance, but the faster you can get into someone's, we'll use China as an example, in the OODA loop of how they're making decisions, the faster we can come up with a game plan to understand where we can interject to stop them from their goal, or at least impede them. So it being timely and sifting through that information is going to be paramount.
Where a lot of this conversation is focused around delivering effects downrange, be it intelligence or combat operations, there's still a lot of this technology and the innovative airman idea based around this technology. California, for example, has used remotely piloted aircraft. Back in 2020, 2021 timeframe, there have been wildfires everywhere, right? And it was taking their National Guard members about as long as 6 hours to go through the data that's being pulled up, right? And trying to figure out where the fire is burning and everything like that. They started using technology, machine learning, AI, which are two different things. Machine learning feeds into AI. to take that data loop is what we're all talking about, that decision point down to, 5 to 6 minutes versus 6 hours. And that's super important. Additionally, there's initiatives out there in the personnel world, something called DAFBot versus 3F2 Iron Benders. It's a competition, as an example, robotic process automation. So essentially for those CSS and FSS members listening, or future CSS and FSS members, innovation automation is going to be big for them. We all know, I don't care if you're working in a civilian company or the military, we're never going to have these large organizations anymore with people, all doing a small, simple task, right? So one of the biggest challenges we have from the commander down to the newest member in the Air National Guard is how we spend our day doing what's important and using automation for things that can help us out. And this idea or this technology or competition is essentially they're making bots. So they're using our members to help develop and design these bots to help tackle those daily and routine and mundane tasks that eat away from our, limited time, both here and at home. And that's really important for our CSS, because right now our CSS and our FSS members are spending a lot of time arguably doing daily routine tasks. Imagine if you can automate some of those tasks so that they can use their time and their effort to solve the bigger problems that they have. Still are there, and they're always going to be there. Very interesting. That just came up a couple weeks ago, so we're going to be putting members to that team, and it is a competition, but the end goal is to develop a really cool system that'll help, speed up our decisions and give our members time back.
There seems like a lot of similarities in that to information operations.
Yeah. Well, what I find pretty interesting is, so first, the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Conceptually, misinformation is someone telling a story, but they just don't have all the facts. But that story, like with the phone tag game, where it just gets propagated.
Right, it's usually fed by disinformation.
Yeah, intentional, right?
Right.
But here's the win for people using it. It costs nothing. It's almost a zero cost to throw one little nugget of information out there, and people have to counter that. So that in itself eats up time, bandwidth, trust. It erodes many things, and once all the work can be done, sometimes you're like, oh, this was just made up. Somebody just threw something out there. So that's one of the challenges, especially with our global connectedness now, is how fast information travels. It costs zero to throw that out there, and when a conflict happens, I don't think anybody's really, Russia or China, are going to be like, oh, let's worry about the lawyers in this thing.
The time frame between collecting data to making the decision, it seems like some of our adversaries often have a little bit of advantage in that area because they don't have as much regulations.
True.
Timeliness is generally a key element. How can we be effective?
Well, I think it's a very complex problem. I think the attritable piece is going to be the first on where this comes from. As we've seen over time that many countries, our adversaries or many nations out there use proxies, or it's not attributable to them. You have to do lots or hours of research to tie, to shell corporations, if you will, or to tie entities with a proxy to a state actor. That in itself is a big challenge to see who's, the forensics of who's funding it and things like that. So I believe it's timeliness is extremely important, but you have to get it right before you just say, oh, yep, that was China. It's got to be China or Russia or some other organization. There have to be mechanisms built in place to get to that information. Ideally, there's already a pattern before that happens, and it's a little bit easier to attribute to a nation state versus some individual actor or organization.
Data management, right? The foundational data management is what's going to be important. From our side, right? How we process, how we increase the quality, how we increase the availability of good data That's going to support our analytics and our any type of machine learning or AI capabilities. It's got to be understandable. It's got to be trustworthy, right? It's got to be accessible.
How do you decide what bad data is and what good data is?
That's a good question. So, in my opinion, there's bad data. It's incorrect, right? It's not right. Or there's bad data, meaning it's helping me get to a decision that isn't correct because it's using data that isn't applicable to the decision-making process, right?
You said something that really stood out to me, and I want to back up a little bit. We were talking about the next fight and how we need adaptable, flexible airmen for it. Say you walk into my office, you say, Chauncey, I need you to go out in the hall and clean the entire floor with a toothbrush. In my mind, I'm probably thinking that's ridiculous. I don't want to do that. Why wouldn't I just use a mop? But if you come into my office and you say, Chauncey, I need you to clean the entire floor with a special toothbrush because if we don't get every inch of this clean, then thousands of people are going to die. See, now I have this substantial purpose. I understand the why, and how ridiculous the task is no longer matters. I know this is extremely important, and I have to do it. The whole point is, how do we present the why to give purpose in a focused, controlled direction while still giving airmen lanes to operate in flexible, innovative ways?
Well, I think your last word there was perfect, the innovative ways, because what our airmen would tell you is, well, why does it have to be one toothbrush, not 50 toothbrushes hooked up to a machine that runs on solar power or whatever, or runs off one airman sitting in his office with remote control? So understanding the end or the end goal or end result helps our airmen say, okay, think with the end at the first part of that and work your way back, and they'll come up with solutions and options to get to the result versus me going, I'll use the example back in my old Army days. They're like, do this that way. I'm like, well, what about this? They're like, no, man, push-ups, go, now do it that way. That's not the Air Force. That's not our airmen with high ASVAB scores and critical thinking skills. It's, what's my problem? How do I go about solving the problem with the best way or the fastest way or the most effective way? And those might be trade-offs because one might be slower than the others, but they built that in and come up with COAs to get to your answer. So that's what we're instilling in our airmen, is to think of the end result and work their way back from that problem set. And knowing that it doesn't have to be just one way because, as Colonel Anderson alluded to earlier, it's like, this is the way we do business. You know, there's only one way to do things, or that's how we do it. We have airmen that have the mental capacity now to attack things from many different angles.
And you kind of hit on it. You needed a reason why. And so I think that's what we've got to figure out how to do, is how do we communicate? What is the reason why? And a good example of this was, we were told that the ISR and Ops group, they need an unclassified system. Well, why do you need that? You always operate on a separate system. So bringing, the ComFlight in and saying, here's what they've been doing on these systems, and this is why it's important, and this is why we're calling you in to make sure these systems, stay up and available. It kind of gives them a new perspective on, I'm not just a troubleshooter. I am enabling their mission by doing my job. So communicating the why is extremely important.
Yeah, I found over time the making sure to communicate the unit's purpose, right? What is the purpose of your unit is important, right? So before you even get to the toothbrush and the clean the floor example, as you talked about, right? If our entire organization doesn't understand what we come to work for day in and day out, then even you won't get past that toothbrush type scenario. We have to know what our unit's purpose is, which ties into communication. Just like this podcast, it makes sense in my head, right? But how I communicate and how I effectively communicate and how it's received is totally different. The importance of it, I think it needs to be broadcast as well. So obviously in the maintenance world, it's really easy where you say, hey, if you don't put this panel on, the airplane's going to crash and kill everyone on board. But as we know, it's never that simple, right? Yeah, I think it comes down to about three things there, right? You got to know the unit's purpose, 100%, right? Every one of our members, via the drill weekend or in an operational environment, have to know that. You're going to have to communicate that purpose early and often, right? And in different ways. Everyone receives data, receives messages different ways, and it's got to be personable, right? So if it's not personable for each type of person who receives information differently, then it's just not going to work, right? And
Right.
all falls back to what the purpose is.
With everything that we've talked about so far, airmen, technology, tactics, procedures, what do you think is the one most important thing that we really need to focus on for success of each of your missions?
I would say just keep investing in our airmen, right? How we train them, how we lead them, and how we kind of let them loose to fail early, fail in a training environment, fail when they're exercising, but just empower them to go out there and make those mistakes now. We want success. We don't want mistakes, but it's better now in a training environment or exercise environment. But we have to invest in our airmen. That's where our money should be put in.
Does anyone disagree?
No, I think we're all on the same page because our missions really overlap, so we know where this needs to go. But essentially, you started this entire thing was, what does the next fight mean, right? Really to wrap this thing up. Every one of those members will be part of what the next fight is by just sheer being part of this organization. And that's what we're concentrating on, is making sure that everyone finds their happy spot where they're dedicated and they can participate in the challenge, the next fight that's coming.
And thrive.
And thrive. I love that. And thrive.
We just need you to be motivated too, and I think part of that is communicating our purpose and why it's important, and finding your happy place is great, but you also got to be motivated so that you can make that happy place your own and to succeed at your job.
Yeah, it's also, I agree. It's important that you take some responsibility.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just enjoy coming out here, man. I mean, nobody wants to come to work and it sucks, right? You just enjoy what you do, and if it's not, it's not this cookie cutter, you got to do it this way. Say, hey, man, I'm going to try it this way. What do you think? It's like, go nuts. As long as you're not exceeding your authorities, you're not spending money you should be spending, go nuts, figure it out. And you might come with a better solution to that problem or that end state we were trying to get to, especially if you have me thinking about it, right? These young kids, younger airmen, are exposed to a whole bunch of different things than I was when I was 18 years old. So the way their mind works is completely different, right? They can break down problem sets faster than I can. I might as well make another selfless plug here. So the TAG's slogan now, no better place. So we pitched an immersion brief to General Nichols the other day, and I stole, TAG's party line and added no better place, because this was for the ISR group, no better place for ISR airmen. That's to include our cyber warriors, but even all those other AFSCs. We have 11 AFSCs in the ISR group, and there's no better place that you can get up, come to work, and have an effect, not only for the state of Arkansas and inside the U.S., but globally on a daily basis, right? Get a good paycheck, but you're contributing to something much bigger than yourself. And Brian was talking about earlier, it's little Fort Smith, Arkansas, that barely on the map, that I don't believe enough people know what all goes on this installation and how we're contributing. This is before FMS. I mean,
Every time we ask, you're like, no, can't tell you.
Yeah, well, agreed. I don't want to go to jail, right? But that's the challenge.
I'm joking. We weren't asking.
Yeah. I won't divulge any secrets here. Jarrett Martin, come get me. But it's really no better place. I can't believe what the benefits, the state authorizes for people that want to go to college or any other benefits, that we aren't just beating people away at the gates for all the stuff that's going on in the space. In all the groups too, not just in my group.
There has been a lot of references to AI in this conversation. So specifically, what do you think about AI?
Well, so I think
Go nuts,
Let me
man.
pull up my
Go
paper that I
nuts.
have.
yeah. So AI versus machine learning, I think, are two different things, right? So I think a lot of it we probably talked about getting processes, testing the limits of how you can improve your programming and type stuff like that, which is today's about technology. So that's why we talked about that. And many of us, and we'll continue to swap machine learning and AI in this whole conversation. But what you should hear is automation of processes, right? And these processes can be at the very simple level of admin, all the way up to military technology, right? And I think the scary part that we all probably are just as worried, no different than the average person who doesn't understand it, is where's the data coming from and how it's going to be used, right? It needs to be used in a way that's responsible.
Yeah, Brian, I'd add on there. I think there's so many terms out there that are kind of thrown together when we start talking AI, ML, autonomous versus automated, and kind of breaking down the differences. Much like we talked about misinformation and disinformation, is knowing there is a difference. I think the big fear is autonomous is a machine that just starts operating, functioning like on its own. People have the older folks think of old movie references like Skynet. That's an autonomous, fictional, autonomous system that starts thinking for itself. And as far as we want to automate processes to help to alleviate some of the extraneous and mind-numbing tasks that our members have to do, whether they're analysts or our support staff or our cyber force. There's ways to automate scripts. There's ways to write code. There's ways to get through large amounts of information faster and more effectively to be responsible with our airmen's time versus it just doing it itself. What we're looking for now is automated processes to maximize our airmen's time and people's time to focus on the real problem sets and not just like a machine do it all for them.
But it does have, you still have to have a little bit of, the machine needs to be able to think and learn on its own too. So, kind of like we talked about all the big data and trying to sift through all of that stuff. Being able to enable the machine and teach the machine to make decisions and focus you maybe on this type of information or this set of information as opposed to, the other stuff that's going on. I think that the fear is that we take the human completely out. I think the goal would be to keep a human on the line and, so to speak, to make sure that, that artificial intelligence doesn't become autonomous.
So the way I see it is that it's potentially a great tool for increasing efficiency. If we had our own Jarvis to just tell them what we need, and then they figure out how to get that and present it to us immediately, then it takes a lot of the footwork out and then gives us more capacity for the strategy development.
Time to think, right? I like to talk about, and I'm glad you brought it up because no way, I'm speaking for myself, no way are any of us in this room an expert on any of this stuff, but we know the basis of AI, machine learning, autonomous stuff. What if we can use the machine to find all these things to save lives and everything else where help predict that, right? Let's, on the personnel side, what if you have a task that's just easily automated, right? And I can give that hour back to that young airman to go work out, to go study their mission a little bit better, to put time to a program that needs it, time and effort put into it that helps other airmen out. That's super important. That's really what we're talking about here. Not creating a Star Wars like AI machine, killer robots. We're talking about how we give our airmen time back to be better resilient, stronger, faster, versus, spending hours upon hours doing a task that easily should be automated.
Yeah, we need AI to give them more time for CBTs.
More CBTs.
Yes.
Or an AI. That's where we'll take automation to figure out an AI to do our CBTs. But yeah, however you want to do it.
There's a lot of potential, I think, but
No, I agree 100%. I don't think it's just the Title 10 missions where where technology is going to help us. If you think how much time our CSSs spend just to generate a report on who's ETSing in the next amount of days, right? If that was automatic, it was already getting kicked out with this person's in their window, this person doesn't have an incentive, this person has this, and it's not, the recruiters and FSS and a CSS all looking at these spreadsheets. It's just all the data is in the system pulling from MilPids or wherever and just generating these reports and this information. That would save so much time for our airmen, right? And then you don't have to worry about them losing their accesses because they didn't get into MilPDS for 30 days or whatever the magic number is. Because that's a struggle for our DSG force, right? It's like, I got to log in. If the computers are down, I'm eating up time, or I can't actually do my mission because I can't get into my system. So,
We've been kind of focused on like how artificial intelligence and technology could make our lives better, more efficient, fill out forms, all of that. But it's also important to kind of look at, what is the adversary doing with all this technology? There's an article out there that talks about there's adversaries out there that are taking a reporter's name and making a social media post, and then some actual reputable news anchor will take that post and repost it, and now it looks like it's fact. And it's really important to kind of to take that into consideration and to think about how do we combat that and protect ourselves against that type of technological attack.
ooh, Kim's warming up. Yeah.
well, how do we do it? I mean, obviously, we can say, well, we'll use AI against AI.
Hit enter.
I don't know, PA, how do we do that?
You know what? I think one of the things that all of you have already been talking about is it's about that data lake, data ocean. How are we going to take that information about what's going on out there in the information world and translate that into knowledge and then strategic application? So what can we do? What processes can we put into place so that we can understand what our adversaries are doing? And then that's the first step, right? They can use AI. They can use, a warehouse full of 500 individuals on cell phones, whatever. But if we don't even know what they're trying to achieve, we don't even know what's happening, what's coming out of that, then we can't take the next step towards combating the disinformation campaigns. Does that make sense?
It does, 100%. Kim's discussion about that reporter is a great discussion point, because I think we're at that point where all of us just take in all this data, right? We go, it doesn't have to be about AI or technology. We just take in data, and individually we're processing, is this good? Is this bad? The media is the same way. So some type of standards and partnerships or adoption of how we actually, look at the AI ecosystem, right? The whole AI thing, and, falling back to, unfortunately, the negative of this, it makes a lot of these things really easy. So I could publish something that Kim went out there or falsely published, I guess is what we're talking about. And if I'm not doing my homework and I'm not validating we're doing it the right way versus picking up the phone call. So a lot of those interpersonal relationships cannot go away of, hey, reach out, Kim, did you publish this article? Did you do that? Versus just pushing it out. And I think over time, my hope is a lot of this does standardize. We're still in the very, very early stages of what the wild, wild west looks like of this, machine learning AI thing that we're trying to wrap our minds in this room, wrap our minds around how this affects our airmen, the DoD, society. I mean, Kim just took us into this society problem of AI, and it's arguably the same problem everywhere. And so responsible use, which is a lot easier said than done when it comes to it, but, and preparing our airmen to, work through that. So this discussion has never been about, replacing people with technology. It's really important that I think we're going to learn more and more and more. Our critical advantage that we have inside our DoD over our adversaries is how we utilize our people at the lowest level decision makers. I think you'll study in history, a lot of the militaries we've gone up against have not used our younger, innovative airmen to make large decisions, and I think we need to be ready to be our members trained in using all the resources, both technology and personal relationships, to make some of these large decisions, because when it comes down to it, we expect all these comm lines to be cut, right, against the peer, and we got to be able to operate in both, right? So when we talk about automating stuff, we're talking about freeing up time so that way we can better develop our airmen to make some of those hard decisions and train and equip and everything else. And so I think that's important to kind of tie this conversation here together and how we're using our information, our data, and our training environments for that. That makes sense. Not to replace our airmen, but to better train and equip them and give them time back, right? And so we'll let the smart people way outside this podcast figure out the right way to use AI, both in the military and society. But we definitely plan on, leveraging areas that we think are important that better fit our airmen.
I thought you were about to walk us through Mission Command. I was going to see you break out a pub, because that's essentially what you're talking about, right? Is as we go forward, we have to have smaller teams at lower echelons, so lower levels. So small team of airmen to know what the objective is, because when we go comms south or there's no comms at all, they still know what their mission is, right? That's what the joint force is trying to do as we look at our near-peer adversaries in great power competition. But it's that concept of mission command at the lowest level. If you think about that, that's how we need our airmen to operate, to understand, to be trained, to be resilient, understand what the end goal is, because when there's no information coming in, they still have to know how to execute. So that's basically, essentially, you just wrapped it all up into what our airmen should be doing. Well done.
What's so funny?
Well done.
Well done.
All because you brought up that reporter, right? Because that's important. And I wonder if our younger folks, we do that data better than we do. I bet they do, right? Or they just don't look at any of it, and versus we're still trying to trust and believe in some of the news agencies out there, and we'll see how they change.
Social media just perpetuates it, right? Like anybody can post anything.
To include podcasts.
I think it's trusted sources, right? I think that's what's being challenged more, is the trusted sources, because you don't have those. I mean, I'm sure there are. I wouldn't know any names because I just watch, read the early bird. But like the Walter Cronkite's or the no kidding, I call them real reporters or real journalists, because there used to. I'm assuming there still are. Chauncey, you can let me know. There's rules for being a journalist, like what's attributable versus some cat that's just doing a walk up and say a podcast, like not a podcast, but hey.
Those lines are blurred.
Yeah.
You're right. Social media does present opportunity for a lot of opinions and potential disinformation, obvious misinformation every day, but it also offers a lot of opportunity for those who seek truth and expose those who have false agendas. I would argue that that is our goal, right? Is to represent the truth.
100% agree.
Well put.
Absolutely.
It's not over. I mean, we're still talking.
Yeah, that's how it plays out.
That's it for this month's 188th Wing podcast. We will have a new episode released each week of drill, so keep a lookout. Coming up next month will be another installment of our Reblue series with Lieutenant Colonel Crom. Join us next time.